This is CBC Vancouver News.
What did you do last night?
What do you mean, what I do last night? I shivered. No one gives a f***. Nobody helps you. Nobody laughs at you.
Bone-chilling cold grips much of BC, hitting the most vulnerable and causing startling sights. Plus,
it's definitely improved our ability, or my ability as a medical director, to hire more people who are interested in providing this sort of care.
BC doctors get more funding to help handle the demands for IUDs. And winter water fun. Amid the cold and snow, we check in on the animals at the Vancouver Aquarium. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The sudden blast of winter weather across the province has many people doing what they can to stay indoors and warm. But for those who don't have homes, this cold can be deadly. Lindsay Duncombe tells us how cities across the province are responding and how those living outside are coping.
This is how Douglas Brooks spent the night as the temperature dipped to -13, feeling more like -24 with the wind. What did you do last night?
What do you mean, what I do last night? I shivered.
Bitter cold compounding the cruelties of living on the street.
Nobody helps you. Nobody laughs at you. Everything I had that I've worked so hard for the past week to get has been stolen from me.
We call 911 and paramedics arrive to help Brooks get somewhere warm. Busy, they say, with calls just like this. When cold creates crises, unexpected frustrations, like Dave Jenkins' frozen padlock, inspire perspective.
I was lucky I had somewhere to stay last night. You know, I'm inside, so I was okay. So I feel for everyone else that's staying outside.
Vancouver hasn't been this cold since 1937. The chill extends across the province. -39 in Prince George, -10 in Victoria. That's a record. Forgive the West Coasters, then, if they don't exactly have the right gear.
Well, I bundled up as best I can, but I wasn't really quite ready for it to get cold quite as fast as it did.
Especially tough for crews working outside.
It's brutal. The wind's blowing, it's cold, everything you touch is cold. Often the materials are wet and it's soggy and it's just miserable. It is one of the worst days you want to be out.
The Arctic air blew in late Thursday afternoon, bringing a couple centimeters of snow, enough to complicate commutes across the lower mainland and prompt calls for better preparation.
This doesn't look good on the province. It doesn't look good on municipalities when people are simply doing something as simple as going home and it's taking them 5-6 hours when it should be an hour.
Looking ahead to what is going to be another cold night, there are increased emergency shelter beds and warming centers here in Vancouver and similar programs being activated right across the province. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
In the Fraser Valley, temperatures are falling even faster, putting more people's lives at risk. As Mira Baines tells us, shelters are full, but longtime residents and businesses are stepping up to help those in need.
Frigid temperatures in the Fraser Valley with wind chill bringing temperatures down into the -20s.
My fingertips are frozen.
Okay, how are you keeping warm?
Hot pockets and a shelter.
Tents fortified on Gladys Avenue in Abbotsford as people hunker down in the cold. Outreach workers provide some relief, bringing gloves and warm drinks.
Today we've got mocha, some hand warmers, socks, blankets, whatever else people need.
He says people are risking their safety trying to keep warm outside.
There's a couple of instances that people have got burned out with their tents and their camps, but they're just trying the best that they can to stay warm.
Another big concern is frostbite, which can happen at sub-zero temperatures and require medical help, but in serious cases, amputation.
Signs that frostbite is actually setting in. Your skin might turn whitish or grayish in color. It might feel kind of firm or numb or waxy, and you might actually start lacking any kind of sensation in that area.
Hypothermia can also be caused by prolonged exposure to colder temperatures and can be fatal. Even shelters that are full are keeping their doors open.
We have an extreme weather shelter that they're supposed to have 30 people at the max, and they were at 50 last night, right? And because you just don't turn people away. You can't.
The bone-chilling cold in Abbotsford has this community group started by sick immigrants mobilizing efforts to drop off blankets and warm clothing.
Now it's time to give back to the community and society. So now that's why we are working.
-10, -8, we saw a couple of times, but this is really cold, -24.
Across the Fraser River, a family-owned restaurant is offering free gloves, cha with curry and rice at its BC and Alberta restaurants.
People are coming in, they're super stoked. It's just nice for people to just come in and kind of warm up. It's so cold outside.
People are hoping for the best as the Arctic grip is expected to start easing after Saturday. Mira Baines, CBC News, Abbotsford.
Temperatures in Prince George plunged to -35 Celsius today, but with wind chill, that was -42. Canada Post issued a red delivery service notice in the city, which meant mail delivery was halted for the day. It issued a yellow alert in the BC interior, meaning deliveries would go ahead but may be delayed. Environment Canada has issued extreme cold weather warnings for both areas into the weekend. In Kelowna, people were treated to the rare and rather strange sight of what looked like a mini tornado over Lake Okanagan this morning. But Environment Canada says the phenomenon is more like a water spout. There it is. They call it a steam devil caused by the -20 Arctic airflow over the relatively warm lake water. Officials say after a warm December, the sudden temperature change has made the interior ripe for interesting weather occurrences.
Or similar to sort of the dust devils that we might see over dry land, rather than a tornado, which is caused by a severe thunderstorm. And those tend to be associated with much stronger winds.
Unlike a tornado, steam devils don't pose a risk of damage, but people are still warned to stay away from them if you're on the water. First, it was too warm to ski in much of BC. Now, a number of ski hills across the province have been forced to close because it's too cold. Kicking Horse Mountain Resort in Golden, Apex in Penticton, Whitewater in Nelson, and Panorama Ski Resort in Panorama were all shut today due to forecast temperatures below -30 with the wind chill. Kimberley Alpine Resort delayed opening today and has closed night skiing until tomorrow. Some Okanagan resorts like Silver Store and Big White are limiting service due to the cold temperatures and strong winds. Skiers at Cypress Mountain on the North Shore, though, were bundling up against the chill.
I like it. We have been missing the snow for a long time. We used the snow last month, but today's my first run actually.
I just put on a lot of layers, 5 layers on, fleece pants, snow pants, gloves.
Conditions on Cypress are expected to stay well below freezing into the weekend, with light wind and more snow expected in the middle of next week. People who respond to home repair emergencies are gearing up for a very busy weekend. One plumbing and heating expert tells CBC News the most common calls he's getting are worries about furnaces not working and frozen pipes. He says your heating system is probably okay, just overworked after being turned down throughout the warmer start to winter. But thawing pipes can be very serious. If in doubt, he says always call a pro.
You don't need a lot of water to do a lot of damage and to have an insurance claim, and that's what you want to avoid right now. Especially in times like this where it's really busy and companies are really busy. If you have any concern that something's not right, reach out to a professional right away and have them come give their advice to you and see if they can get that faucet from being either unfrozen or to stop dripping.
He says you can leave water taps on slightly to prevent freezing. And if it's not the pipes, it's the roads. One Vancouver man noticed cars struggling to make it up a hill outside his home in Mount Pleasant. So he decided to lend a helping hand and his legs, pushing cars one by one to safety.
Being in stressful situations, it sucks. And we all know, and especially driving, going home, and you're sliding down, you think you're going to hit cars. It's a nightmare. So I would do it again. And it's just an easy thing you can do.
Jamal Hamoud says he knows how stressful it can be to drive in wintry conditions, especially when you're not used to it. He also admits he didn't want anyone else to hit his car, which was parked on this hill. Hamoud says over the course of an hour in the storm, he helped about 8 cars up the hill with some assistance from a few other snow angels. Good on them. 3 Vancouver police officers have been acquitted of assault in connection with the arrest of an arrest that left a theft and obstruction suspect with several broken ribs. A warning: this next video may be upsetting to some people. Surveillance video at the commercial Broadway SkyTrain station from 2017 shows VPD Constables Brandon Blue and Bo Spencer, as well as now retired Constable Gregory Jackson, punching and kneeing David Cowie. Court heard that Cowie was left with 4 broken ribs and a collapsed lung. The Crown argued Cowie was nearly motionless when he was struck, but the defense claimed the suspect was resisting arrest and the 3 officers were following their training on use of force. The judge eventually found the officers acted reasonably to try to bring the suspect under control.
And we have more difficult IUD insertions or people who've never had one before, and we had no ability to bill for that.
Coming up, women's health care providers in BC have been sounding the alarm about long wait times for IUDs. Now the province has taken steps to address those worries. That story's next. And happy Friday to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. The second Friday of the year is known as Quitter's Day. It's when most people tend to throw in the towel on the goal they set for themselves in the year ahead. The CBC's Katie Breen has the story of someone who made a goal years ago and has stuck to it.
This was Tony Bussey. That is, until the forest fires in Fort McMurray changed his life. When people were being evacuated almost 8 years ago, he needed 2 plane seats.
It was just a lot of how in the world did I let myself get to this? And, you know, I just felt very ashamed. Part of me felt kind of selfish in a way, but yeah, it was a horrible feeling. Just kind of hopeless, really.
He's not exactly a New Year's resolutionist, but Bussey does know a thing or two about setting a goal and sticking with it.
And what's worked for me is baby steps. You take small little steps over a long amount of time and you will get results. It's not something that's going to happen a day or a week or even a month. It's a lot of baby steps done over years, and then you develop habits. And then as you develop habits, they become easier and easier to maintain.
He's lost more than 300 pounds since the fire, down from almost 600 pounds at his heaviest. Just over a year ago, Bussey underwent surgery to have the excess skin on his stomach removed, and he has a second skin surgery scheduled for April. It's not just weight. Bussey says any goal can be achieved going bit by bit. And once you start achieving something, he says, the rest just falls into place.
The satisfaction I find of meeting your goal, even trying to attain to it, whether that's financial, whether that's giving up alcohol, drugs, whether that's just improving just something in your day-to-day life, it makes everything else go easier.
Not every day is going to be a success. Bussey says the important thing is to not let a bad day derail you. Failure's part of the process. Bussey says if you pick a goal and stick with it, it can snowball, and the sky's the limit.
It's always been a dream of mine to run a marathon.
Katie Breen, CBC News, St. John's.
Wait times for people wanting a specific kind of birth control are expected to drop in BC. It's more good news after the province's decision to make birth control free here. Michelle Morton explains how doctors have succeeded in getting more funding in order to keep up with the demand for IUDs.
We had 2,200 to 2,300 people in mid-December, and we just closed off the online bookings for now until we can work through all those folks.
Dr. Renee Hall says her team at the Willow Clinic in Vancouver is working to see patients waiting to get an IUD, a form of birth control. She told CBC in May that doctors applaud the move to make prescribed birth control free in BC. But IUD wait times rose, and doctors were struggling to keep up with demand. She says fees doctors could bill before didn't cover expenses, such as equipment and anesthetic.
Especially at a clinic like ours, we are using freezing all the time to help with pain management, and we have more difficult IUD insertions or people who've never had one before, and we had no ability to bill for that before.
But last month, the province increased those fees by more than $8, rising from roughly $47 to just more than $55.
It's definitely improved our ability, my ability as a medical director, to hire more people who are interested in providing this sort of care.
Doctors of BC calls this an improvement and says it's a result of physician advocacy to support critical frontline contraceptive care. In August, Zenith Reynolds says she tried several clinics across the Lower Mainland, but couldn't get an appointment until December.
I wanted my IUD out for many reasons, many symptoms that I was having that I was attributing to the IUD. So for me, it was making me a lot more anxious.
A registered nurse, Reynolds says she understood the delays.
I talk to my patients, I hear their stories about their wait times for certain things, but I didn't think getting something as simple as an IUD removal would take this long.
The province says it consulted with family doctors to make these changes.
Willow Clinic has seen 4 additional doctors hired because of this increased funding, and their goal is to get through the wait list and to start booking IUD insertion appointments again by the spring. Michelle Morton, CBC News, Vancouver.
This was sunset earlier tonight over Cypress Mountain. Still open today despite these frigid temperatures, and it will be a frigid weekend across our province. Darius will have your BC-wide weather forecast right after this.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Some may not like the snow and cold, but a few creatures at the Vancouver Aquarium love it.
So all of our animals are doing really well in these temperatures, mostly because this is a normal temperature that they would experience out in the ocean where these species are found. And a lot of the species that we have here are even found even further north than Vancouver. So this is nothing to them. Well, a great example of that is our otters.
Come say hi. What about here?
So anytime that there's snow or ice, the ice is something that we give them on a daily basis for enrichment. But when the snow comes naturally, they absolutely love playing and frolicking in it. And as trainers, we want to make sure that they have a good time. So sometimes we might hide treats in the snow so that they can go and find it. So temperatures in the Alaskan waters, don't know off the top of my head, but much colder than it is here. So they can withstand that. These animals also have a variety of abilities to be able to stay warm, adaptations like large blubber layers or thick fur. And also here at the aquarium, the seawater that we pump in is actually warmer than the air temperature. So staying nice and warm and toasty in the water seems like a little bit of a backwards idea for us, but it works really well for the marine mammals here.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Time for the weekend, and Doris Madavi is going to tell us how bone-chilling it's going to be across BC.
Well, if you were looking for an excuse to cancel your plans, I have good news. It may look very calm across the province. This is earlier today. Nothing really happening, or so it seems. But as soon as we take a look at our temperatures, oh, it's frigid. So these are the lows that we're going to see overnight tonight heading into tomorrow morning. You can see extremely cold still. It's not until later this weekend we start to see those temperatures move off the coast, but they do still linger in the southern interior, or the entire interior, including the southern interior, for quite a while yet. It's only in the south around Kelowna where we start to see those budge at all in the weekend, and then it's early next week that we see some change. Now, if we look at our highs over the next few days, you can see not much change compared to those lows yesterday. Tofino and the west coast of the island, really one of the only parts on the island that's going, or across BC, that's going to see temperatures not in the negatives, and even there, it's only 0, so don't know if that even really counts. As we get into Sunday, still, so you can start to see that Arctic air mass move off, but still very chilly, and Monday, same story. Now, if we look at what we're feeling in terms of wind chill across the province, you can see still lots of very chilly temperatures across the board, and feeling even colder than it is because of those high winds we have, not just on the coast, but in the interior as well. So expect to need to bundle up if you're heading outside at all. Now, in terms of precipitation, nothing really until we get later into the midweek next week, just to the northwest this weekend, and then it's Monday heading into Tuesday that we see that precipitation make its way down into the province and then hit us here on the coast. So expect maybe some flurries on Tuesday and then some proper snow or rain on Wednesday, depending on just how quickly that Arctic air mass moves off and how quickly we warm up. Now, in terms of conditions, you can see fairly calm across the province, even here in the northeast, not looking too likely that we'll see that snow, just a possibility. And here in Vancouver, we see those very chilly temperatures over the next few days, but then as those flurries and snow or rain that comes next week, depending on how fast we see those temperatures come up once again, is going to be the deciding factor in what kind of precipitation we get. But for now, don't let the sun fool you. Looks pretty outside. Maybe admire it from indoors.
Okay, good advice. Have a good weekend, Doris.
You too, Dan.
Before we go tonight, some international check-ins. Houthi militants have vowed to continue attacking ships in the Red Sea after the U.S. and Britain launched overnight airstrikes on multiple targets in Yemen. Washington says it's trying to restore order to the vital shipping route. As Sasha Petrusik explains, the militants have carried out dozens of attacks on commercial ships since November. to protest Israel's military operation in Gaza.
Outrage in Yemen's capital today. Houthi supporters railing against the American Great Devil for its attack overnight. Houthi officials saying 5 of its fighters were killed. They vowed the U.S. and Britain would pay a heavy price. American and British fighter jets took off from carriers and bases in Cyprus into the early morning hours, using Tomahawk cruise missiles to zero in on 60 targets across Yemen, says Washington.
We have no doubt that the targets chosen were targets that were meant specifically to degrade the Houthis' ability to launch drones, to launch missiles, to store them.
Canada joined several other countries in supporting the mission.
Canadian military members involved in some of the planning, but we did not have any operational assets involved in the precision strikes.
And they succeeded, says Washington.
Were the strikes successful last night, sir?
Yes. I don't think there's any civilian casualties. That's another reason why it's a success.
Since last fall, Houthi militants have used their bases to launch attacks, sometimes armed boardings, against international shipping in the Red Sea, justifying them as a reaction to Israel's operation in Gaza. The Houthis are backed and armed by Iran, and the West has been hesitant to confront them for fear of spreading conflict across the Mideast, a concern voiced by the UN today.
We are just extremely worried about the risks and the greater risks of escalation.
But experts say confronting these groups is actually the only way to prevent escalation.
Until you make Tehran pay a price, they're going to keep doing it.
Whether the U.S.-led mission has solved the threat to shipping isn't clear yet. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
Israeli lawyers appeared at the International Court of Justice today to defend their country against accusations of genocide in Gaza. They said South Africa, which brought the case, has distorted the truth about the conflict.
If there have been acts that may be characterized as genocidal, then they have been perpetrated against Israel.
South Africa presented its case yesterday and is asking the court to order Israel to stop its offensive in Gaza. A decision on that will probably take weeks. A ruling on the accusation of genocide could take years. International Court of Justice rulings are legally binding in theory, but are not enforceable. Israeli leaders have defended their actions as a legitimate response to Hamas's attack in October. On that day, militants killed about 1,200 people and took more than 200 hostages, many of whom are still being held captive. And that is your late news for Friday. Thank you for joining us tonight and all this week. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is tomorrow morning at 6:30 on CBC Radio 1. And Tanya Fletcher will have your late local news tomorrow night at 10:30, right after hockey. Good night. Stay warm.